Hey everyone, it's Mark with MainWP. And today I'm going to be talking with Todd Jones. He and I collaborated on a book and he authored this really cool ebook called Maximizing Profit with MainWP. We're going to talk about the process that we went through and, the experience and what we learned and things like that and what the book's about. So I'm going to let Todd introduce himself. Take it away, Todd. Tell us about yourself and what you do.
My name is Todd Jones, and I have been writing for MainWP since like 2016 or 17 or something like that. Articles, I've done other stuff, but mostly articles, but this was a cool project. My business is Copyflight Media. Pretty much have settled in on that. I have some other like branded stuff, but Copyflight is the main hub for all that. And you said to talk about what you do. That changes like a lot. Like 10, 15 years ago, I might have said I was a web designer. I was talking to a guy before we got on the call, and I figured out over time the best thing I do is help pull out from the client, the customer, the things they need to pull out to create a comprehensive message for their brand. It's basically helping people find their story, right? The brand. But writing is a thing, right? It's part of what I do. And I've written blog posts, web copy, articles, emails, landing pages, those kinds of things. Ebooks. I have done a few for myself, but this is probably one of the first ones I've ever done for somebody else. I really enjoyed it. Basically, you got a story to tell. I can help you tell the story. So I guess that's a good summation of what Todd does through Copyflight.
That's pretty cool. So I know that especially in the last couple of years, this idea of telling a story has become more and more prominent when it comes to marketing and branding. What got you interested in that? Did you just kind of find yourself there, or was it something that you always kind of felt and, worked your way into?
At one time, a long time ago, in a different lifetime, I was doing ministry stuff, right? And there's a lot of storytelling in ministry, whether you're teaching a class or you're talking from, to an audience, whatever. And I always enjoyed that part of things and movies and even songs and pro wrestling. Yes, pro wrestling. None of that dawned on me until later on, but somewhere around, and it's on my about page on Copyflight, 2012 or 2013, somewhere along there, we had a series of bar camps in Central Arkansas for like 3 years in a row. Two of them were in town at UCA in Conway, and one was at Little Rock. This was at Little Rock. I go to Little Rock for this bar camp at University of Arkansas at Little Rock, and a guy named Chad Williams gets up and he gets voted in to do this talk. And I'm sure it was like in his head, right? When you go to a bar camp, unlike a word camp, the talks are not set ahead of time. So everybody who comes, like say 50 people show up to bar camp and 20 of them have a talk they want to give and they register. And then the rest of the camp votes on the talk. Votes get slotted throughout the slots. There wasn't a whole lot of people who came with the talk that day. And Chad had one just kind of in his back pocket. And it was about the power of storytelling. And he used a lady named Jennifer Aker, who at the time was at Stanford. I think she's moved on, talking about storytelling is powerful, memorable, and impactful, or something like that. And it was like, oh, this is me. And actually, the funny thing is, Mark, at the time, I was writing for a statewide publication in Arkansas called Talk Business and Politics. And my topic, my area was startup technology, which I thoroughly enjoyed. So I would talk to startup business owners. It was a lot of reporting, but once in a while you get to do a more of a featured article. Guy there who started the company Aptogy. It's an app for school districts, basically. He goes, Todd, he came up to me, he goes, I think I'm ready for you to tell my story. I'd been asking him, like, when do you want me to tell a story? So I wrote the first feature article in Aptogy through Talk Business and Politics. It was just like things like came together, like, I need to focus on storytelling. And I really didn't know what that meant. I think somewhere after that, I got a copy of the Story Brand by Donald Miller book, and which I devoured, and I had thoughts about all that as well. And I've gone down the storytelling rabbit hole in different areas. A couple lately that I have gotten a hold of, which would be good for the audience, especially if you're doing maybe a WordCamp talk or something like that. Stories That Stick by Kendra Hall, which I highly recommend. And then The Perfect Story by Karen Eber. And Karen did a TEDx talk on storytelling. So she's both of them kind of have expertise in the field, and says that I've learned more. So what does that mean? Like telling the story, those are kind of things that is evolved even up until now. It's still evolving. Like what does that mean? I just know that storytelling is important and it's powerful. And these tech guys sometimes are like, well, I just want to ask the question, Mark, which is your favorite movie, Star Trek or Star Wars? And why is Star Wars the best one? That will get a debate. So yeah, people like storytelling and all the different forms. And I think we're at a point right now in 2025, agency owners listening, content marketing has gotten kind of to a point where it's kind of peaked in terms of informational. And now it's time to be a little bit more creative. And I actually said that on a content marketing podcast last year. It's like, I want to make content marketing more creative. I want to see people do unique stuff. Everybody does the educational blog posts. To be honest, man, there's only so many times you can write an article about SEO for small businesses. There's only so many of them you can put out there, and
Yeah.
every topic's been covered 100 times over. So now it's time to be. What is it? Jay Akazona says, don't be the best, be their favorite. That's where we are, I think, in content marketing. And so anyway.
Well, it's interesting that of all things you bring up is SEO, because last week we released an interview I did with an SEO expert. And one of the things that he brought up is, and I'm sure we might get into the AI side of things here at some point in time, but one of the things he brought up is that yeah, it's all well and good that AI can assist you and everything, but you have to keep in mind that AI is still scraping the internet. So if all you're doing is pushing out AI content, you're not putting out anything original. So it sounds to me like, you're kind of saying the same thing. The whole point of storytelling is to be able to create something that's original, even though it is based upon something that's been, recycled a million times.
Or if you could find an original angle, that is a power that a lot of people don't use. For sure, finding a different angle about something. I had a fleeting thought there before that, and it went away, but I'm sure it'll come back up eventually. But
Is that the flight part of copy flight?
no, but I have this concept of remarkable content. And I thought about this really before AI started taking a hold, but you really got to know, first of all, what good content is, right? And then to evaluate that. But one thing about creating remarkable content is creating something original, something different. Oh, I know what it was. Grow and Convert is guys. I have read a lot of their stuff. Grow and Convert is an agency that does content marketing at a kind of a high level for companies. And one of the guys in charge, in one of their articles called what you're talking about, the whole recycling stuff, whether it's AI or somebody just writing it, right?
Right.
Basically, you're doing the same thing over and over. Now you're just using AI to pump more of it out. But they called it Google Research Paper. So you take a topic, say WordPress management solutions. You take a topic, you go do research, and chances are you're probably looking at 3 or 4 or 5 different articles on page one. You're recycling what they said, right? And and there's no original content. You're basically putting out information. And we still have a need for that, but using AI to scale that is nobody wants to read another article about WordPress management unless you've got a different angle that you can bring up.
And that's definitely makes a lot of sense. Maybe one of the uses for AI is to help you come up with original ideas, but you still have to put out the information or the content or or make it compelling. And
I am by nature a strategist, and I like to strategize and think about stuff. AI can assist you once you've done that, I think, in a lot of different ways. I created this little video using, it was an AI video thing. I like to play around. I am really interested in how we can create content that utilizes, well, a lot of people, especially in technology, like comic books and that kind of thing. I don't know why we don't use more of it. We'd like to do more of that eventually. Like, we had a concept 5, 6 years ago called MainWP Man. and he's kind of fallen by the wayside. But I
Yeah.
have had this ideal of the MainWP Avengers or whatever. You have a group of
Uh,
people who come together and
yeah.
help. So what you're trying to do, you're doing some education, but you're also doing some entertainment. You're
Mhm.
creating a connection with the audience. People have strong opinions, but yeah, you could do the MainWP Avengers, and I've played around with that a little bit in the articles at MainWP. I'd like maybe do more in 2025 for the heck of it.
It's a matter of finding the angles that speak to people, and everybody listens differently. Speaking of things that you have created, this ebook, I don't even remember when. I think Dennis approached you first, didn't he, about this?
Yeah,
And
I think
yeah,
so. Yeah,
it was quite a while ago, and we went through quite a process.
about a year ago. So
Yeah. So why don't you tell me a little bit about what the ebook is, what the concept was, how it came to fruition, and you can even, like, if you need to, say what you want to say about, collaborating with me. It better all be good, but on this,
uh,
it was a process, and I think we both went through a bit of a learning curve on it.
So what I learned about Mark was that both his parents had a background of some kind of background in terms of editing. Is that what you told me? Both of them had some
Well,
kind of editing,
my
or maybe
well,
they're teachers or something.
my dad is a retired university professor, and he
Yeah.
taught foreign languages. Language and communication is important to him. My
Mhm.
mom is a retired nurse. And so anytime it comes to charting or anything, of course, everything has to be
Had to be
100% accurate.
accurate.
I don't know if it's in my DNA or if it was, nature versus nurture, but yeah, it's
I was
something
just
that
hoping that you didn't pull your hair out, metaphorically speaking.
I had hair before you and I started talking.
Yeah, yeah. I was thinking about this morning. We probably, and some of it would have probably not been relevant anymore, but I could have literally taken some of the articles I've written over the last 7 years at MainWP, put them together, and we could have actually done this book. But again, like I said, some of it was earlier in my career. I wasn't as good of a writer. Some of it's not as relevant in 2024 as it was in 2017, 2018, or whatever. I did look for places I could recycle something. And I did use that with a couple of stories, the one of Renee and the one of Ivica. Those were both stories from articles, content I did on the website, but they worked. I wanted some stories in there. I wanted people to be able to connect what they were doing. So for me, the information was there. Like, we had this information, and the information wasn't anything groundbreaking, but I wanted it to be something that connected with people who were using MainWP. Pretty much anybody who does WordPress on a regular basis does some form of what MainWP can help people do. What I call web care consultants, web care specialists, almost all of them have gone in that direction just because it helps with residual income or whatever. I'm around them all the time and what they do, and a lot of it is just marketing as well. And so, the idea was that this is coming from the standpoint of, you're like Renee, you're like Ivica, you're like Ryan, or whoever is handling web management for a client. Like anything, I wanted to have an origin story, so I probably made Dennis uncomfortable with learning about the origin story. And there's more to learn, but I made him tell me some of it, and some of it was just I pulled out of. He had a lot of podcast interviews that had the origin story or some aspect of the origin story. It's just the way Dennis is, and you and I know this.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
doesn't want people to talk about him too much at all. He wants to be in the background. He wants to shine the light on other
He's
people.
he's very modest. He
Very,
he
very
is
so.
he is
And
he is probably one of the most humble people that I've ever met.
yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so if you're trying to find out about the story, you actually have to go where he told it somewhere else, because he's got things to do. He doesn't want to spend time telling you.
Yeah.
And I'm over here going like, so when you talk to your co-founder, how did you talk? Did back in this day, was it a Skype call? Were you on AOL Messenger? How did you talk to this guy? None of that stuff I don't know, but I went and found as much as I could from interviews, either web interviews, article interviews, or podcasts, and try to piece that together. It's not near as long as I'd like for it to be, but there it is. We kind of started with a brief history because I wanted people to know where the product comes from, like why he started the product. And when he started the product, this is something I learned, and I don't know if it comes across too well in the book. But when he started the product, he was thinking he was going to make this product for other affiliate managers like himself.
Correct.
And
Which is why the privacy aspect
yeah,
is
yeah,
such a
absolutely.
big fundamental part of what
It
MainWP
is.
is.
I was unaware that at least his group of affiliate people, they were like so secretive about what they did.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that. And so it was like an eye opener for me. His whole idea was we're going to do this for affiliate managers and like myself, like my friend, and they would be able to do stuff privately so nobody else could see what they're doing. That was the original idea. But of course, it pivoted like a lot of businesses did. I don't know if the kind of affiliate management he did just doesn't exist anymore. It looks a lot different, I'm sure, where you had
Sure.
like
Yeah.
you had multiple sites, and I think Google kind of cracked down on some stuff, and
Oh,
and
sure.
so
Yeah.
it became a lifeline to people who wanted more of an open source product without using a third party SaaS WordPress management without the SaaS.
Yeah.
Something I just kind of came up with. It came out of this whole process, Mark. So while I was writing this book, that came out. It's like, oh, it's WordPress
Yeah.
management without the
Yeah.
SaaS, and now it's a tagline that
Yeah.
MainWP uses.
Which, by the way, when you threw that at us, Dennis and I kind of had this conversation of why have we never thought of this? But that's,
Sometimes it takes somebody
yeah,
outside
right. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And that's why you get more people involved rather than trying to make everything your own idea. Or one of the things that's been great about working with MainWP is the collaboration is so it's not just encouraged, it's like required. And it is so great because everybody loves to collaborate. Somehow there's this team here of people that just we like each other, we collaborate with each other, and there's not really a lot of room for ego because we just know we want to make a better product. But
I'll be honest, I was astonished you put my name on there. I'm like, you're paying me to do this as it's a branded ebook. I didn't expect my name to be on it. And like you
well,
put my okay.
that was important to me, actually. I'm also a big fan of giving credit where credit is due, and you put a lot of work into this, so why not?
So you talk about the team. Another thing people may not realize, we're sitting here telling a little bit of what we know about the history of MainWP, is a lot of these people working with Dennis now were working with him when he was doing the affiliate marketing. So
right.
that's how long some of these guys and gals have been with Dennis, working with Dennis. So this team is not like something that just came up in the last couple of years. They've been
Right.
around for
Yeah.
15 plus years. But anyway, that was a big part of getting to know about what I was, the company, and, I'd love to add more to it. But like you said, Dennis is not really interested. So here's a little something I probably didn't tell you. I didn't know how people react. I originally went to ChatGPT and said, this is what I'm doing. What would be a good outline? And it gave me an outline. And I looked at it and I thought, I kept looking at it and I was like, that's really not that bad. And I had to change stuff. It wasn't exactly how I wanted it to be. They were trying to tell me how many words for, because I said it needs to be this many words and whatnot. I adjusted it a little bit, but it basically provided me a framework from which I built the outline for this ebook. And at that point, it was just creating an outline for each particular section, each different chapter. So chapter 1, creating web care success. You started off like how to get customers. And I think that was, picture current roster customers and, little stuff like highlighting the benefits and all that kind of thing. Then I do the whole relationship, developing relationship through networking. So some of this stuff, it's just not groundbreaking, right? But I tried to fit it into a narrative that, hey, I'm a web care specialist, or I'm somebody who has like, maybe I have 10 or 15 clients that I've built websites for. They struggle keeping things updated, right? Because a lot of clients do. That was the picture I had. So you're Mary, you're John, whatever, you have 15 clients, you're just like, I have an opportunity to create a web care part of my business here. Here's what we can do. We can set up an email, we can send it to them, say, hey, this is what we can do. That's the approach I took. And I feel like it helped me create this. And then, we had to do other stuff like the intro and the conclusion. And you had this idea, hey, I think it'd be awesome to do pro tips. I'm like, okay, which is more or less like a bullet, one summary bullet under each chapter. Right. Think of something, and some of them, my head was fried by the time I got to it. And I was like, And I wanted to employ analogies like stories which is why I came up with Renee and Ivica. I think
Yeah.
Ivica shows up in the second chapter. He's been a long time user of MainWP, runs the Facebook group that we're all in. I felt like people need to see a name that somebody else is doing this and they're using MainWP to do it.
Yeah, I agree. The anecdotes are definitely useful. And one of the things that I just wanted to throw in here is the idea that we had when we started this was that we kind of wanted this guide to not necessarily be an agency or web care agency in a box, but to make it very easy for anybody, whether they're just starting out or whether they've been around for a while and need to plug in a few holes. I like to say that there's something for everybody, but especially if you're just starting out and you want to get your system up and going, from the beginning and do it right. This ebook was really designed around that concept. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, well, we were talking about it because, ultimately, I guess the objective that we had was to see if we could convince people or persuade them to get a pro plan, because it would take what they're doing to the next level. But even still, and I used to tell people this all the time when they say, go ahead and try MainWP, set it up on an instance of WordPress. You can try it for free. There's plenty of extensions for free. You can get the feel for it. And then if you like it, then you can upgrade to pro. If you want to go full force and just do a pro for a month and try it out, you don't have to stop whatever you're doing if you're already doing something else. And some people don't. They're not doing anything else. I have played around with different stuff. When I was at the agency 10 plus 12 years ago, we were using the big third-party tool, the big one, and it was convenient. Logged into the thing, and that's when I saw the convenience of using a tool. I'm like, oh, this is pretty good. And then I tried another one through another brand that allowed you to do like 6 for free or something like that, and it was all right. I think I tried MainWP one time and gave up on it. I'm not the most technically astute. Then I went back and said, I got to find something. And I'm friends with Andrea Whitmer, and she wrote a really good article. It's like the golden standard of a review article for MainWP. I installed it again and I began to get better at handling it. I tell people, say, if I can do it, anybody can do it. Yeah, I'm not bad, but I'm not
Yeah.
great.
Well, and in your defense, in the early days of MainWP, it was a little bit of a chore to get it set up. Now it's, click, click, and you're done. But I remember back when I was introduced to it in 2014 or whenever that was, I got it working, but there was a little bit of brain damage you had to put up with in order to get it. I think the team obviously is very proud of what they've done since.
Oh, sure. They
Yeah.
no doubt made it a streamlined it, made it better.
Yeah.
There's certain things you can do now you couldn't do even just
Yeah.
a few years ago. I think back about the backup thing, and they had a backup plugin extension at one point, and after a while they just said, most people are using something else, and it's just not worth keeping this extension, and they did away with the
Yeah.
backup plugin.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
that felt like it unhandcuffed MainWP, if that made any sense. It's like they felt handcuffed to the backup plugin. So I typically use Updraft. I know people have the lifetime of BuddyPress. A lot of people use WP Vivid, and then WordPress Vault or whatever it's called, Blog Vault. And so everybody has like the plugin they like for
Right.
something like
Yeah.
a backup. And MainWP allows you to keep using that in
Yeah.
most instances.
Yeah.
That I think is a great thing. And then, there are other things that they're building in, like the cost tool. That is really cool. I haven't really taken full
Yeah.
advantage of it,
Yeah.
but
The cost tracker. Yeah, that's
yeah,
really neat. Yeah.
cost tracker. What I really like is that with MainWP is that you can use the tools you like.
Yeah.
And there's an extension for almost every popular plugin for maintenance. Say you got 15, 20 clients, you did a WordPress website for the last 2 or 3 years, and you're thinking, maybe you've had a couple of them say, hey, how do I keep this thing updated, whatever. And so here's your chance to offer this new service to you. And that's really what the first chapter was about. The first 2 chapters kind of getting going. And then once you get that point, you say, this is going to save me time. I'm making some more money out of it, and I could probably scale this operation. That's when you go to the MainWP Pro and start taking
Right.
advantage of some
And
of
that Right. And that is one of the things that we've always been proud of. The fact that MainWP out of the box, we don't have a trial version. You get the free version, it is fully functional, it's not limited, it's not locked down. And when you get into the pro version, it's because you're ready to enhance what MainWP does for you in order to, add some other cost or time savers and things like that. Well, I think that when it comes to WordPress management, we're the only ones who do anything like that. Some people, they have 30 or 40 sites or maybe even more, and they've never spent a dime and they're
Yeah.
using MainWP. I would say the philosophy is generally when you start making money with MainWP, that's when you get to spend money on MainWP if you choose to.
If
But
you choose to, yeah.
yeah,
And
yeah,
we have people in MainWP community, because I know them, who basically probably 3/4 or more of their sites they didn't even build. They're
yeah,
just running the security maintenance part of it. I know people who have had other marketing agencies to say, I want you to run the maintenance and security for all of our sites. They didn't even build the site. They're just,
yeah,
and
yeah.
that is something that you can do with MainWP. It's
Mhm.
astonishing. You can do it at scale. And
Yeah,
anyway, it's
yeah,
pretty impressive product
yeah.
in that regard. Yeah.
Yeah. So we already touched a little bit on your process with the ebook, and you mentioned that you used a little bit of AI, but what was your whole process from kind of beginning to end, and how do you feel that it went? What kind of things did you pick up and learn along the way as you were doing it?
Anytime you do a project like this, I think we clocked in a little over 5,000 words in the book. Well, I can't just sit down and write 5,000 words in one setting. So I had to chunk it up. Okay, so here's the intro, then here's the first chapter, and here's the outline, and work on each section. If you saw my Google document, the Google Drive, it was a mess. It's like I ended up doing folders for each chapter because I would have to go in
Oh.
there. Sometimes the rough draft would be pretty rough, and you go back and you clean it up a little bit, and then Mark would get a hold of it, and it would look even different. But anyway, that in fact, I go back to something that Joanna Weeba used to always to say, and she's the conversion copywriting queen from Canada, and she would tell you that you don't really. How did she put it? And she got it from Eugene Schwartz, I believe, but basically when it comes to copy, you kind of build it, right? you
Mhm.
you assemble it. You assemble copy, whether it's a landing page or a 5,000 word ebook. And so I was assembling this thing. Each section I was having to assemble it. And yeah, sometimes I would have to like get ChatGPT to help me with certain little sections of it, whatnot, maybe make it more clear or whatever, but you're assembling it. You create the outline. This is the idea I have. And sometimes that would evolve. And that's always been the case with me in my writing. Sometimes I start down, like, this is the objective, and I start writing it. And before it's done, I'm like, well, it went a different direction. There's something live about writing sometimes that causes your target to move. It doesn't happen that way all the time, but for
Well,
me it does a lot.
yeah.
And so the target will move a little bit. What you think you're writing about changes a little bit. And certainly we could go back and change the titles of the chapters and maybe the intros and conclusion when we were finished. And that's why I never get hung up on writing intros when I start a section or an article. Sometimes I'll just write something just from my brain to say it's done, now I can move on. But knowing
Yeah.
that I may go back and change it, and very likely I will, you don't really have to write that intro until you're done. And a lot of times when I'm struggling to write an article, I will just start in a body and I'm going to come back. Because I like my intros to
Sure.
be a hook as much as anything. A lot of times people, oh, well, we
Sure.
do a summary. And I think our intros were more summarizing in this ebook. But like when I'm writing an article, I guess it's a storyteller in me. I want to hook people with my intro a lot. And I've done it many, many times at MainWP with the articles. I've hooked, with cultural references and that kind of thing. I remember one time doing an article and I started it. Actually, there's two. One was, I think it was a scene from The Equalizer with Denzel Washington. And somebody pinged me like, "Hey man, I really love that. I'm a big Denzel Washington fan." I mean, that's the kind of reaction you want. The other one I was talking about project management, and this is just some silly connection I made with Nikki from the Born series. You remember, played by Juliana Stiles. The Nikki Parsons Guide to Project Management or something like that. I mean, I enjoy doing that. My emails that I write are that way too, usually. I mean, I'm building some kind of hook at the beginning. But I guess if I had to do it over again, I would want to maybe have a little better hook. Yeah, the only way to do it is assemble it, really. I mean,
Right. Yeah.
again, even if you talk to an author who's written a book, 30, 40, 50,000 words or whatever, they don't write them overnight.
Mhm.
Even if you create a story like a fiction, a work of fiction, you create the outline, right?
Mhm.
I've heard authors say, well, I had to go back and rewrite this character or whatever because
Right.
it was a living, breathing thing. And by the time I got to that section, the character didn't do what I initially thought was going to. But when you write an ebook, it's a little bit more instructional, a little bit more, this kind of ebook is.
Mhm.
And so I would like to go back and do one that's a little bit more story based. I would have loved to have had like an ebook with like 3 web care agents and where you tell the story of how MainWP like changed their whole business. I think that would be a great ebook, but that wasn't the focus on
Well,
this particular ebook.
no.
So maybe the
Yeah.
next one.
Well, you can create the main WP comic series,
Yes, I would love
Yeah.
to do that.
Yeah.
We've done some before. I've done
Yeah,
some before
yeah.
actually.
I know that that's a passion of yours, and I do agree that even when I'm writing something, I don't care if it's a 2 paragraph long or 100 pages. I have definitely found that the body evolves into something that I didn't originally. Well, I mean, look at your own life. It doesn't matter. I mean, your life is a story, and I can tell you that my life has evolved in ways that I never would have thought possible as well. If I were to go back and write my original introductory paragraph when I was 16 versus what I would write for my introductory paragraph now, they'd be completely different things. I agree, treating things kind of as this living, breathing entity and letting it evolve and then going back to write the introduction, I think is
Here's why you shouldn't let AI do all of your writing. Okay. And
Mhm.
I'm not advocating that you go out and write articles using AI. I do think when it comes to AI doing creative work, the prompt matters. It's just like computers. I took what was it class called data processing class or something when I was in high school. One of the first things you learn, and you know this as well as I do, garbage in, garbage out,
Garbage out.
right? So this is why I said it's so important to know what good writing is, right? What remarkable writing is. That way your prompt will be better. But that's a whole for another discussion. One reason you shouldn't use AI to do all your writing is because we crystallize what we think or how we think when we write. It helps us process things. You probably have done journaling at one point in your life. I know I
Mhm.
have. It's lost to the great divide. I don't know where it's at, but I think they were all saved on floppy disks, if that tells you something. But
Five and
some
a
of the,
quarters or 3.5s or 8 inch?
yeah,
Which one?
I think
Which?
it's 3.5, but
Okay.
I think the small ones. But I had a really deep, dark, depressive time in my life, and I processed my thoughts. Sometimes they were just as simple as me yelling and screaming at the void in
Yeah.
written word. And sometimes it was just me making observations about life or an analysis about something or whatever. And so writing is a good habit to have. We're at a part in 2025 where business owners are trying to figure out a good way to use LLMs, generative AI, whatever word you want to use for it. And I do agree that if you can streamline your process, that's a good way to use AI. Somebody in a group I was in, will anybody know a good AI to build a logo? I was like, I haven't come across one yet. And I wouldn't
Yes.
recommend using AI to,
Yeah.
to create a logo. What I would do, though, if you're not a graphic designer, is use AI to conceptualize what you want. AI comes up with something, you like it, then you can send it to a professional graphic artist and say, here is
Right.
what I have in
Yeah.
mind. Can you make a logo to it? That's
Yeah.
different. You're brainstorming with it. But there are people who like to shortcut everything,
Mhm.
and you can't shortcut everything. And the temptation, I think, is for people to use various tools with AI to shortcut stuff. Now, again, if it's something that's repetitive tasks that you can, speed up process, whatever, that's different. And creativity. Now, I have been playing around with using prompts to create emails. It's not foolproof, but I have been impressed with what I come up with. But it comes back to the prompt, what you're putting in,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
that's a whole nother
Yeah,
discussion.
the creativity still comes from inside your head. And that's the important thing that, that needs to be remembered. And kind of going back to what we were talking about, I think, especially in the beginning, you had to chunk it out because you would send it to me and say, is this what you're looking for? And you wouldn't want to write a
Yeah.
whole ebook. You wouldn't want to write a whole
No,
ebook and send it to me and say, is this what you were looking for? Because, what if I looked at it and said, well, no, then it would be a complete waste
that
of
was kind of
time.
my
So,
thought. Yeah. No,
yeah,
I would
yeah,
send over the outline and I would send
yeah,
over parts of it.
yeah,
This
yeah,
look like you're going the right way. Yeah. I
yeah.
mean, but here's the thing. When we all started this, we all had a general idea of what we wanted. The project itself evolved,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
As I started putting pen to paper, you're like, yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what we want to do.
Yeah.
Let's add this to it. You came up with the pro tip idea toward the end. Something I said was kind of in there, and you go, that's like a pro tip. I
Mm,
think we should do one for every chapter. And I'm like, oh, okay.
yeah.
I
You have a better memory of that than I do, I got to be honest. I
thought
actually
it was
don't
a great idea.
I don't
It's an
remember
action
who
item.
I don't remember who came up with the pro tip idea, but sure, I'll take credit for it if you
It
want to
was
give
an
it to me.
action item. It was a great idea. I loved
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually found the book to be very useful. I'm hoping that a lot of people will too. And hopefully we'll start getting more and more feedback on it. And this can be, edition 1.0 and we might put out another other editions of it. But going back and looking at this and the process that we went through and everything, if you were to pick, your top one or two things that you learned along the way of making this ebook, what would you say that they were?
I think I learned that I can use AI to help me along the way. And that's when it really dawned on me. It's like, hey, AI could be very useful in this kind of a project. I know some people have completely written ebooks with AI. I don't recommend that. Just brainstorming, just coming up with ideas. And, Joanna Weeb, who I just referred to a while ago, copy hackers lady. I used to go to these, they call them Tuesday tutorial. Everything's got to be a story, right? So here's a story for you. And she was like an over the shoulder look. Like she would get on Zoom and she'd show people how she did stuff and whatnot. It was awesome. And she was talking about headlines, titles and headlines and stuff like she's an old direct response conversion copywriter. You need to write at least 25 titles for each thing you write. I'm like, ugh. And I'm like, maybe she said 50. I don't know. It was like that, 25. Even blog posts, she said everything. And like, it was like a kick to the gut. Like, I don't want to write 25 titles.
Yeah.
I'll
Yeah.
I'll I'll play around with 3 or 4 different
Right.
variations.
3 or 4. So
Yeah,
20, even 25, if that's the low end, that's still a lot.
it is a lot.
Yeah.
But you know what you can do now? You can use Chat GPT or
Mm,
Gemini or Perplexity or whatever you
whatever.
want to use.
Yeah. Yeah.
They will spit them out in seconds. And the thing about it is, if you like one of them really well, you like 3 of them really well, you can say, all right, let's take these 3 and let's create variations from these 3.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because the rest of them are throw them out. But here's what her point was, and this is the human mind, right? That when you write 25 of them or 50 of them or whatever, you get out everything, the good and the bad,
Yeah.
and you flush your system out, and there will be some really good ones in there. And
Yeah.
that is a process, creativity process thing. I think Chat GPT can help some of us do that, get that out of our system. Maybe we don't do it as well as some other people do. I've decided in the last few months that I might be a little neurodivergent, which is a word I only heard a year or two ago. I knew I had some OCD, a little bit of OCD in me. I don't know, everybody processes stuff differently. It takes a load off for me to say, here, come up with 10 variations for
Yeah.
me of this, and I can choose and go on. I think that was a big deal for me. It's like I can help my process be streamlined a little better using some kind of LLM. And now I use 4 or 5 of them at and
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt, but you're making me think kind of an analogy that I'm thinking of is I've been a photography nut my whole life. And I mean, I used to use film cameras, manual focus, and all that stuff. I still have my original cameras. And then autofocus came out. And I
mm,
remember that the first probably year of that, I didn't take one single good picture because I was letting the autofocus do all the thinking for me. And I wasn't paying attention to composition. I wasn't paying attention to lighting. I was just like, it became kind of this point and click. And then digital came out, which made it even worse because then it was like, I'll just take 1,000 pictures and I don't care. One of them has to turn out, decent. And ChatGPT or AI can be similar in that way, that if you're not careful, you let it take over and do everything for you, and nothing's going to be good.
Yep. Yep.
But if you learn to stop and say, okay, this is taking this step out of it for me, but I still have to put my thought into it as far as the knowledge that I have, composition and color and lighting and all of that, then I can put out a superior product.
Yeah,
And
the
it's
analysis I like to use is web builders or actually page
sure,
designers in
yeah.
WordPress. So 13 years ago, when I was working at the agency, I'll tell you exactly what we did, and I was okay with it. I learned how to become a front-end developer. I'm not very good at it, but I learned. So we had people who on staff who design. Some of them were actually developers, and some of them, there's a girl in the office who was a good designer. And so she would design it. You would get the mock-up in Photoshop. I would get it, or whoever, and it was up to you to build the site. It was WordPress, so you had that. We had some other platform websites which I didn't design or develop on, but I would like go into the dashboard and change content like Drupal and Joomla and that kind of thing. But WordPress. So and we used Genesis, and over time we had pretty much created our own starter theme. So you uploaded the starter theme, or actually somebody probably do it for you, and you now would go in there and start pecking away. Well, I had to learn how to use CSS and how to make it do the stuff I want to do and all that kind of stuff. And then come within a couple years after I was at the agency, like you started having Beaver Builder and other design, really better page designers that came out. Well, a lot of people jumped in then without having the prior knowledge of how to work through CSS and HTML. They struggled sometimes because they didn't know the why or the how to, whatever. So AI is similar, in my opinion, when it comes to like using it for content or other things, really. I imagine project managers who are using AI would say the same thing. Well, you need to know what, the philosophy behind why you do what you do before you put it. Because I'm on the email list for Maven, which is a online school courses thing, and they have a lot of AI courses. And so one of them is for project management. Well, I can imagine if you jumped in now without having the fundamentals of project management, you would be lost. So you got to know the foundational stuff, the HTML, the CSS, a little bit of PHP. I mean, you don't have to, but I think it makes you better, when you get to whether you're using Elementor or Beaver Builder or now Gutenberg or whatever you're using, because sometimes there's going to be a time when you're going to need to know how to do some of that stuff, or you need to know that it needs to be done. Maybe that's where I'm at. I know it needs to be done. I'm going to call somebody else, but whenever I had CSS problems, I'm always calling the vendor like, okay, I got a CSS problem. You got to help me out here. So I feel the same way about content, because content and copy using AI, it comes down to the prompt, and there's lots of things you got to know how to do, I think, to make it better. Can you use it? Yes. I do share your concern about letting it think for you. And I have a friend who has a Substack who wrote about this very thing this week, did a fantastic job about talking about it. That is my concern as well. If we're not careful, we'll just outsource all of our thinking to whatever, AI or whatever. So we got to be careful about that for sure.
Well, great. Is there anything else you wanted to add about this?
I was apprehensive about doing it for the sake of MainWP, because I don't know how effective ebooks are as lead magnets anymore. But I was optimistic. I don't know how many people have downloaded it. I do know a friend of mine who downloaded it, who had been more of a designer. He said, I'm going to do more of this. So he said, I'm downloading it and I'm printing it out and I'm diving into it. Like, okay.
Oh,
And I've
that's
heard
good.
I've heard a few people have done that. And I don't think that the idea was necessary to get people on the newsletter. So it's a little different. So if it helps people make that transition, then I'm really, really happy. I guess that's kind of where I stand as far as that goes. If it's something that you could legitimately charge for, then I think it's a pretty good ebook. You probably could charge $9 for that or something like that.
Yeah.
But I think it's a great resource. Just like a college education, it's not the end. It's just getting you started on that journey. I don't know. Like I said, I was apprehensive, but I guess if you're looking at it from a lead magnet standpoint, I don't think that's the best use case for this ebook. But transitioning from the person who maybe has a handful of clients and who wants to make this part of their business moving forward, I think it's a very good source to make that transition. And you had the idea, and it was a good idea, of adding all these resources in kind of like an appendix area, along with some definitions. There was some research into it. There was a whole lot of pulling out of our brains, because you and I have been in this business for a long time.
For sure.
So yeah, and then you're more technical than I am. So
Mhm.
you had ideas that like, yeah, I hadn't thought about that. So I think the collaborative effort made it a better product overall.
I agree. And, I'll just say that for anyone watching, that Todd was really easy to work with. And he took any criticisms I had. Well, if he did get offended, he sure didn't show it in text. He he took it very well. And I hope that I presented them in a constructive way rather than any other way.
Editing
But
can be such, I've heard so many
yeah.
people and my friends talk about editing. Like basically there's a way, everybody has their ideal about what, like you have your editing standards and somebody else has
Right,
their editing
right. Yeah.
standards, and there's a little bit of subjectivity to it. So
Yeah,
the way I
yeah,
look
yeah.
at it is I'm writing it and you're editing it the way you want it to be. So that's in your ballpark. That's
Yeah.
what you want to
Yeah.
do. And I'm just following your lead on that.
I think editors have to be sensitive
Yeah.
and authors need to have thick skin. I think that it's a bit of a kind of a combination of both. It was an absolute pleasure to work with you on this. And I agree with what you're saying about it not necessarily being as much of a lead magnet in the sense that we're introducing people to something but what I'd like people to see with this is see it as a guide on how to add a value add to your business without really a lot of cash outlay. Even if you're buying the Pro right off the bat, it's not that expensive. So it's really an easy way to add, income to your agency without having to spend a lot of money in the first place. And that's really our goal. Plus, I'm a big systems guy. I like building systems, and I feel like if you can start out building a system the right way to begin with, it's going to save you a lot of trouble down the road. If you can use this as a little bit of a blueprint to avoid pitfalls down the road, then it's done its job. That's what I'd like to add to it. Lastly, Todd, tell everybody where they can find you and what you can help them with and all of that.
Physically, I'm in Conway, Arkansas, but I don't think anybody wants to come to Conway. So you find me, I've been really active last year on LinkedIn. That consistency has paid off with a lot of people responding to stuff I say, even the most benign things I say. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. I like Twitter a lot. T.E. Jones is my thing. I've been on there since like 2009 or whatever. And I'm pretty active on Facebook. Those are the three big ones for me. And then my website is copyflight.com. COPYFLIGHT.com. If you just Google Copyflight, it'll be there. I was telling a friend of mine who's been in the business a while too in copywriting, and more experienced than I am. I said, we're more of a business developer these days than a copywriter. And I think that's really true. But I help brands figure out their story and tell it. And I'm
Yeah.
also getting involved in helping companies build or facilitate community, which I think is more important in this day when you have to fight what I call the algo gods. The algo gods are raining down on us every day. And so the best thing you do is create your own community. Not easy to do. I think in WordPress, MainWP has done a great job of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
We're very proud of our community.
yep. Oh, and I do have a Substack. If anybody's on Substack, if you, I'm trying to get more active on it this year. The personal one, Todd E. Jones, but also have one called Story Vault, which is going to be about, guess what? Stories. So
Imagine that.
storytelling. Yep.
All
Anyway,
right. Well, fantastic. Well, thanks for taking time out of your day, Todd. Really appreciate it. Always enjoy talking to you, and hopefully we'll get to work together more in the future.
appreciate it, Mark. Thanks for having me
All
on.
right. Thank you.